Welcome to the First Unitarian Church. As we come together to celebrate the spirit of Thanksgiving. If you are here for the first time, I am not Reverend Tom Goldsmith. He chose to avoid Thanksgiving by tripping on a step and tearing his patella, warranting surgery and other things that help him avoid his ministerial duties. I am not a minister, and I don't play one on TV. So he looked for someone who could pose for him. He lived in New York. I visited New York many times. He has a beard. I have a beard. He has thinning hair. I have thinned hair. He's damn cute, and so am I. Seriously, I want to take a moment to give thanks. I love this community. I love the gift of music that we are treated to every week. I love that I never have a conversation with someone here that isn't a surprise filled with riches of intellect, insight, and humanity. It takes intelligence and commitment to be Unitarians. Most, if not all of us, chose to be here. We chose this place, this space, these people. As a child, I had to go to church, or there would be consequences. And later, guilt was supposed to fill in the gaps. I chose to be here, and I thank you for the endless blessings you provide me and Elaine. Reverend Goldsmith offers the following words. May we pause at this time of the annual fall harvest, which is also a poignant time in our lives for reflection. It is at this time that we become especially mindful of the gifts and blessings that miraculously grace our lives. May we cherish the kind word and the gentle touch. May we cherish steadfastness and to truth and deeds that weigh heavy on the scale of justice. For blessings known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, we give thanks. Amen. Symbol of light and knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. Please join us now to sing hymn number 68.
Good morning. When I heard that Tom had fallen and injured himself and had to have surgery, I gave him a call to see how he was doing and to wish him well, and here I am. So be forewarned. I'm actually very honored to be here this morning with you. And I'm sharing Tom's words here for this Thanksgiving prayer. He says, "We know the basic philosophy of Thanksgiving. In all that goes right in the world for us personally, as well as when hardships find their way into our lives, we need to pause in life's rhythms long enough to acknowledge the gifts that bless us. Offering gratitude taps into a bit of humility, acknowledging the blessings that come to us not of our own making. In case enumerating the many blessings that touch us so profoundly escapes our awareness or ability to articulate them, my dear colleague, Tom's dear colleague, Richard Gilbert, delivers a helping hand. May his litany for Thanksgiving remind us all of that which makes us a grateful people. Thanks be for these, for slants of sunlight through windows, for shimmering shadows on snow, for the whisper of wind on my face, for the smooth skin of an apple, for the caress of a collar on my neck, for the prickling of my skin when I am deeply moved, for the pounding of my heart when I run, for the peace of soul at day's end. Thanks be for these, for familiar voices in family rites, for the faces of friends in laughter and tears, for the tender human arms that hold me, for the silence of moonlit nights, for the sound of rain on my roof, of wind in dry leaves, of waves caressing the shore, for the softness of summer breezes, for the crispness of autumn air, for the faithful turning of the seasons. Thanks be for these, for the sight of familiar faces, the sound of our spoken names, the welcoming embrace of outstretched arms, for the ritual of friendship reminding us we matter. Thanks be for these. Amen. I said this after the first service as well. The choir is a tough act to follow. A cappella, no less. Wow. So this time I'm sharing my words. Ah, the holidays. What an intensely emotional roller coaster of a time they can be for us. They often elicit such a range of feelings, from love for those close to us and joy for our blessings, to sadness due to losses we have experienced and what we may feel is missing in our lives, to despair at the pain of the world and longing for it to be otherwise. In his poem, The Guest House, Sufi mystic poet Rumi addresses the myriad of feelings that we humans experience and encourages us to welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweeps your house, empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. In her poem Messenger, modern-day poet Mary Oliver, in her characteristically simple and beautiful way, asserts that her job is loving the world. So perhaps during this intensely emotional time of the year, we can do our best to remain present for and welcoming to whatever arises for us, and to do our work of loving the world in all its beauty, tragedy, mystery, and delight. This is Messenger by Mary Oliver. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums. Here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing, since all ingredients are here, which is gratitude, to be given in a mind and a heart and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy, dug-up clam, telling them all, over and over, how it is that we live forever. Amen.
For bread
the gift of music, right? Thanks to our musicians and the choir. Each of you should have the opportunity to see David Zabriskie from the choir's point of view. And so I was going to suggest that each one of you steal back behind during the service. Welcome to newcomers, to get to know us more and about the many, many wonderful things we do here at the church. There's a welcome table in Elliott Hall after the service and a congregational life table. The announcements are in your order of service, and there are a couple that I'd like to point out. On the first page of the announcements are two announcements about Saint Esteban, and today is the last day to donate for the Thanksgiving. And then there's the giving tree as well for Saint Esteban. So I hope you can help those causes. On the second page, the Caring Network, the members of the Caring Network invited to attend a training session and potluck dinner on Monday, December 4th. That's something you might want to get into your plans. And then at the bottom of that page is Here Comes the Swap, and I'll just let you read it, but it's about sharing and swapping and goods with other people, and some of that will also go to Saint Esteban. During the offering, join with me to greet your neighbors and give thanks for the beautiful morning and for the inspiration of our relationships. The offering will now be received. Today's sermon, Breaking Bread, was written by Reverend Goldsmith. You'll quickly see that it is his story in his words. I'm often astonished by how seldom I'm aware of all that I should be grateful, until something disastrous happens. It seems that nothing better than an old-fashioned catastrophe can extract the gratitude buried within. Isn't that true for so many of us? We have to practically taste the ashes of defeat before we are moved beyond our control to a new level of circumspection. And then, almost mystically, a ledger becomes somehow visible, the pros and cons accounting of what is right, or out of sorts in our personal world, and also in the world at large. Suddenly, a larger perspective emerges, and the immobility of a broken kneecap pales when held to the light of loving caretakers who lurk covertly in your orbit of family and friends. But make no mistake about it. If I am ever embroiled in an old gangster movie scenario, and I'm given the choice of paying back a debt or having my kneecaps broken, I will not equivocate. Life's trials often overshadow our good fortunes, where we may focus obsessively on that which has gone wrong. It seems to be our human nature to dwell incessantly on negatives, which conveniently justify our despair. Maybe it stems from our Puritan tradition, a kind of guilt when feeling good about anything. There's also a bit of superstition involved in not wanting to tempt the gods by gloating over good fortunes. They may decide to even the score. Few people, my wife being an exception, will say something like, "Gee, I haven't had a cold or a flu all season." When I hear such a pronouncement, I make sure I buy an extra box of Kleenex on my next run to the store. Good news is sometimes best kept as a private matter. And sometimes we inadvertently tip our hand. I delivered a sermon last month on how everything can change on a dime. One of my examples was missing a step. Ouch. Okay, I wished I could do that one over again. We don't want to offer the gods any ideas of our fortunes or vulnerabilities. They like to keep the universe in balance, and the gods are sometimes known for having a perverse sense of humor. In alignment with these sensibilities, I get a little nervous at the premature celebration of the Democratic Party following the 2017 election. I'm more inclined to whisper my thanksgiving that candidates of color, women, Muslims, and trans emerged triumphantly on November 7th, restoring a little faith in humankind. But we're merely at the beginning of a long road to moral recovery. Too much self-congratulating leads easily to complacency and thwarts our drive to reach desired goals. A movement to lift justice and diversity as a cultural norm where everyone has a seat at the table will need a string of victories as far as the eye can see. Just following the 2016 presidential election, I shared with you one of the most profound remarks I had ever heard, coming from a Native American speaker addressing a rally in Ashland, Oregon. He said, "If Hillary had got elected, we'd still be on the couch." We didn't require any more detail. We all knew what he was saying. He simply reminded us that democracy requires work, like everything else we care about. In order to reach some equilibrium in the world and in our lives, we must participate fully in the process that restores hope and vision and a newfound trust in life. Isn't Thanksgiving itself a huge step in that process? Too many people feel ambivalent about Thanksgiving because it seems laden with expectations and obligations. But Thanksgiving is also a splendid opportunity. It's an opportunity to formalize our commitment to deepening our trust and faith in family, neighbors, and friends. Thanksgiving gets down to the essence of nurturing a community. The threads that hold us together as a nation right now couldn't be more tenuous. Families are pulled apart by different political persuasions. Neighbors are divided. Just ask Rand Paul how that goes. I've never felt a greater cloud of dread hanging over any Thanksgiving like this one. Showing up for the grand dinner feels like we're actors in a play by Jean-Paul Sartre, where even the turkey is stuffed with angst. But I always remember Thanksgiving posing real challenges. As a teenager, there were family members from out of town who supported the Vietnam War. I was always prepared for a good fight. The configuration of family and extended family that showed up would never do so on any other day of the year but Thanksgiving. We were a composite of Jewish refugees, Southern Baptists, Black Baptists, Roman Catholics, and Unitarians. The gaggle of children who always tagged along were raised either very strictly in parochial schools or had the equivalent of a Summerhill education. We were long hairs and bald, Nixon supporters and Kennedy fans, God thumpers and God dumpers, and God knows what else. But when we sat around the Thanksgiving table, we improvised to accommodate everyone present. A table that extended from the front porch, through the living room, through the dining room, up to the kitchen. And we felt a singular power fueled by gratitude. Gratitude for the distinct opportunity to break bread with a crazy mix of people who felt they belonged there. My mother, who hated cooking, sometimes referred to as the anti-cook, offered a meal to the best of her ability, and everyone knew that. and was appreciative of the frozen bird's eye corn, string beans, and broccoli. Soon, a hush would fall in anticipation of a prayer, which always in stunning manner hit the universal themes of our common struggles, the good fortunes that bless us, and gratitude for the opportunity to reconvene as a family that had experienced the machinations of an unkind world. Gratitude rested at the heart of our celebration, and thus many traveled extensive miles in severe weather conditions at times for no other reason than having an opportunity to break bread together. We all had choices about whether to gather or not. The distance to be traveled could easily have sufficed as a legitimate alibi to skip the festivities altogether. But there was something at work within us which made the reunion inseparable from our lives. And it was more than just a tradition that inspired us. In all the different personal histories, moral perspectives, and levels of alcohol tolerance, everyone saw the need to take a step closer to the other. Affirming our connections raised our spirits. The world was plenty hostile, so it was good to have establish a safe haven. The process was actually quite simple. Breaking bread together. Thanksgiving, or the celebration of the harvest, comes at a bleak time of year when the skies are often searing metallic gray, the trees at their most stark, and the fields lie fallow and spent. Oddly, Henry David Thoreau looked upon this time of year as a time for recovery, which we tend to reserve for the new green buds blossoming in the spring. But Thoreau suffered from the oppression of Concord's summer heat, thus feeling refreshed and enlivened at this time of year, with crisp autumnal winds and chilly temperatures. It put him, according to his journal, into a favorable and poetic mood. Thoreau addresses a lot more than just the weather. He actually takes note of something we often overlook, namely the connection between the mood of the days and our own temperament. When was the last time we consciously stopped long enough to check our own temperament against the disquieting disposition of the times we live in? Something Kurt Vonnegut would refer to as heavy gravity. Our prayers of gratitude may be a bit tempered this year as we give thanks for Robert Mueller, #MeToo, and CNN. But the harvest was brought in nevertheless, and once again we find so much gratitude in spite of catastrophes strewn alongside us. It would be interesting to learn the mood of the day would have been at the first Thanksgiving in 1621. It was a 3-day feast shared between pilgrims and Wampanoag Indians, unlikely guests at the same party. Many myths have arisen since then because no accurate accounting was ever made. But we probably know a few things. One, the heavy death toll in the harsh winter of the previous year had an effect on the mood of the day and the temperament of those who were present. Two, an expression of gratitude could still be gleaned in the heartache of all that was lost. Three, what made it possible for two unrelated cultures to join in celebration and the promise of renewed trust was the old sacrament known as breaking bread together. Sacraments are not limited to ancient rituals distributed in dark and dank medieval cathedrals. The purpose of sacrament, literally, is to make visible a symbol of the reality of God. But we don't always have to be that literal in order to drink in the essence of a sacred life. Of a sacred rite. We tend to look upon God more as the ideal of perfect love and a just world. And breaking bread makes visible the sought-after hope of establishing relations of harmony and love and trust with people even unlike ourselves. Thanksgiving didn't become a national holiday until 1863, although appeals were made to 3 administrations before Lincoln. America was embroiled in its Civil War, its deadliest war in history, and Lincoln hoped the new holiday would unify a bitterly divided country. He was looking for an opportunity to transform the context of people's lives, impact the mood of the day, and therefore the temperament of the people affected. Breaking bread is not just an idiom. Coming to the table and breaking bread is laden with symbolic and powerful meaning. Breaking bread becomes a proclamation on the human ties that bind. For devout Catholics, it's symbolic of entering a new life. For the rest of us, whether in Plymouth in 1621 or during the Civil War or in the uncertain contemporary times of today, breaking bread remains an opportunity of remaining and re-entering a new life. You and I share this bread in common. In common. It requires us to both give and receive. Breaking bread is a sacrament that connotes affirmation, trust, and confidence. At its deepest level, Thanksgiving is a beautiful sacrament. We gather with possibly some unusual people with whom we have perhaps little to share. But by breaking bread together, we affirm our human ties along this tempestuous journey of life. Together we may see a glimpse of God and feel grace blessing our lives, that in dark times we still feel gratitude for gifts that are not of our own making. Thoreau delivers to us this splendid image of sacrament. He wrote, "Nature spreads both table and altar before us in the fall. It's a sort of sacrament, a communion, a not forbidden fruits, which no serpent tempts us to eat. I wish for each of you much joy at the table this Thanksgiving. Be receptive to the mysteries of the divine as you break bread with one another." Amen. Will you turn to hymn number 67, please? I wanted to share a section of a poem that I wrote called Giving Thanks. Are you giving thanks? Begin by honoring all sorrow. The cynical ballad drones on and is so loud it's unbearable. Despair creeps through nights and paints days with gray-black darkness. It's ominous, and yes, I'm aware of it all. I just want to see the morning like I was 5 years old. Every day, brand new, and the only day that happened yet, free of context, facts, or wisdom. There's that storm of death and hurricane of war and that flood of guns and the famine of love, and it covers me in vines overnight. I have to find the morning again and again. But I stand here now and the ground is solid, the air promising. We cannot afford to ignore it. Pay attention to these wisps of love. Quiet. All around us, this is an endless wisp. A wind feathering through the trees, a dew sitting on the hillsides, magnifying each blade of grass, dancing across mountaintops like puffy clouds. Those wisps are everything, what we can see and what we cannot see. Reverend Goldsmith ends with, may we rekindle our faltering hopes and insist again on the vision of our common humanity. May we keep this life, its mystery, its grace, its beauty, and with the love that sustains us all. Sometimes we get the joy of breaking bread with kindred spirits. So join us in Elliott Hall, and while there may be no bread to break together, even though I saw something similar, let's honor honor the image with love, some peace, some harmony. Oh, and coffee.